first, let's have a selfie. And I will tell you why later. So, strike a pose. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming to share your lunch hour with us. Today, everyone takes photographs almost instinctively, especially if you are, like me, a social media addict. And this afternoon, we're going to look at some pictures and figure out why pictures may be important to us and why it may be important to people in the future. I discovered the photographs while perusing the digital library of the Cornell University. And there are colorized pictures of the photographs that Dean C. Worcester published in the National Geographic of November 1913. When I looked at these pictures, they gave me a sense of nostalgia, which is exactly what John Berger, in his essay, Understanding a Photograph, says what a photograph's function is. He says that a photograph's main function is to remember the absent. And when I remember the absent, I also remember history. And beyond the aesthetic value of the photograph, I look at them as artifacts, meaning to say it is an object by itself, and also it has meanings, impliedly or expressly, within the photograph itself, which may be there, present, or not there, absent. So how do we look at it? My primary question for this afternoon is simply, are photographs an accurate depiction of truth? And a subset is, are Worcester's photographs authentic? So every time we look at a photograph, does it tell the truth? And in this particular case, is Worcester's photographs of Philippine indigenous, non-Christianized people authentic by themselves? You might want to ask, why shouldn't photographs be real? I think, and people have argued, that photographs are the closest reflection of life and the real world. So let me make a comparison. Unlike painting or drawing, where the image is largely influenced by the skill of the painter or the style of the creator, a photograph is the closest we can have of the real thing. You know, because it is taken by a camera, it's taken by a mechanical gadget. You click, the camera, the mirrors open, it lets the light in, it captures, it burns the image in the negative is processed, it is projected onto a photosensitive paper, and then you develop it some more, and what you see in the paper is actually what you see in real life, always, as a general rule, except of course for the size. You know, you take a picture of a football player, he's 6'4", and the picture is just 4x5. But basically, it is the same. For this reason, photographs hold a cachet on truth. As in fact, authors have said that pictures hold an authority. Things exist, things are the truth, because it is taken by a photograph. I submit that this photographs also elicit a kind of reaction from the viewer. And because of this, photographs may mean something different to you or to somebody else, halfway across the world. So these two things, the photograph that is objective and the photograph that is subjective, is basically the basis or the premise of this talk. The issue of the realness of a photograph has been raised using theories in semiotics, or the study of symbols. In this regard, I would like to debate about the sense of truth and meaning of Worcester's photographs. I argue that Worcester's photographs are not ipsa docitur. And when we say ipsa loquitur, it is a thing that speaks for itself. I argue the other way. I say that every picture must be interpreted, every picture must have a person to explain it. I argue that the images trapped by Worcester in his pictures form a continuum in historical time. So that to talk about the pictures is not only to affirm whether something has happened, but also we must identify why the thing itself happened in the first place and how the photograph keeps on influencing people even years after it had been taken. So this is my thesis. We need to look at the photographs not as single images, but as whole narratives, the clues of which may or may not be hidden in the photograph itself. So how do we do this? In order to understand the photographs as artifacts, I turn to Roland Barthes. In his essay, Rhetoric of the Image, he identifies what a photograph is capable of transmitting. So we all know this, but Roland, Mr. Barthes, simply put the terminology. So we have a linguistic message, or a text that anchors the image, a coded iconic message, which is the meaning of the image as we perceive it from our point of view, and a non-coded iconic message is what is the image itself. So if it's a man standing in front of a tree, that's the non-coded iconic message. If a man, half naked, is standing in front of a tree, dark-skinned, beside him is a 6-foot American, there are other coded iconic messages inside that picture, which we will try to discover. Barthes also talks about the two kinds of meaning in an image. We also know this. The denotation, which is what it is, and the connotation, which is what it means that is not expressly stated, but we know it because it is expressed in a way that conveys the message that is not said literally. So I'm sure some people call this subtext, some people call this implied meaning. Furthermore, I look at the framework of dialectical materialism to understand the photograph's meaning in the following context. So, as a product within the capitalist mode of production, as a testimony to class struggle, and as a tool for political propaganda. But before we go to the pictures, we have to explain where the pictures came from. So I will have to explain a little bit about the accidental interference of America in Philippine affairs. Yes. Although the participation of the US in the Vietnam War or the invasion of Iraq is global knowledge, not a lot of people know that in the early 1900s, as a result of Spain losing the Spanish-American War, the US inherited the Philippines upon the signing of the Treaty of Paris. So that when the Americans came into the country, they ran smack into a nationalist movement that was close to being victorious over their former colonial masters. So they didn't like the America to stay there. But the Americans insisted in staying and implemented one of the bloodiest US pacification campaigns that, eradicated whole towns, killed a lot of people on both sides, and leads into the taking of these photographs. Interestingly, also, during the 1900s, the Brownie, the first mass-marketed camera, became available. And what happens when a mass-marketed gadget comes along? You talk about the Mac now, you talk about the camera in the cell phone itself. People use it for various reasons. So families used it to photograph family events. Artists used it to explore its artistic capability. Scientists used it for their studies. And of course, government has to have something of use to the camera. And what they used it for was not only taking photographs, but recording stuff, eventually in relation to information gathering, information keeping, information tracking, surveillance, and control. So even up to now, especially in these times of security-conscious societies, cameras have gone that way of that function. The photograph of Dean Worcester comes under the latter category of use. So he came to the Philippines as a member of the Sherman Commission and the Taft Commission. And these commissions were sent by the United States to the Philippines to determine the condition of the Philippines and also to give recommendations with regard to what to do with the Philippines. It was accident that they got us, and therefore they didn't quite know what to do with this country. And of course, they were a colony themselves before, and now they're turning into colonists, and they did not know what to do. So, both commissions were set out by the US government to determine US policy in the Philippines. The primary issue being whether or not the US should grant independence to the Philippines. And if we get this, then this is the crux in understanding the Worcester photographs, because he was part of the commission that had to recommend stuff. So here are the pictures. This is Dean Worcester. Okay. I keep wondering what this is, though. Oh, okay. Okay. So this is Dean Worcester. He's 6 feet. He's more than 200 pounds. Okay. A very typical, well, I won't say very typical American, because during that time, the 1900s, I don't know if the average height of Americans was 6 feet. But this is him. Okay, this is one of the, we look at it as a narrative. So he presents the house, the locale. In a play, it's called Establishing the Scene. It's the house of the people in the mountain province, and he focuses on the skulls. Okay. And the linguistic message in the caption is that this is their house, and it is adorned with skulls because they are headhunters. So, okay, I leave it there. This one is a picture of a girl of Apayao and a man in Atingyan of Apayao. So the linguistic anchor is wild. The other one is, if we read the caption in the man's photo, he doesn't suspect, he tells us that the man is wearing a wig because he has long hair. So he says, the Tingyan man's loincloth is almost invariably blue, and in his upper garments, he exhibits a decided partiality for gay colors, especially for red and yellow, 2 colors usually combined in his turban. As a rule, he does not cut his hair and is not above supplementing the natural growth by such a feminine addition as a switch. Okay. Other photographs, Chief Atos of the Bagobos, a Bagobo woman. The Bagobo woman is described as having a cheap European fan, and he also says that they are fond of ornamentation that makes them unable to work. So he says the red and yellow skirt belongs only to the wife of a man killer, but the rest of the costume is typical of the Bagobo women, especially the bell-decorated bag worn from the shoulder. The cheap European fan in her hand contrasts strangely with the curious bead pendant which hangs from ear to ear. We'll talk more about these later. These are the Ilonggots, and he describes them as small. So I don't know if he means small as in stature or small as in population, but definitely small from the perspective of a 6-foot person, of course. He says that they are forest dwellers, and in the strictest sense of the word, living in small groups in the woods and moving their villages very frequently. This is another photograph, and he comments on the half-nakedness of the man, the father in the family. This is a particularly special anchor for me. He says the Negrito is the original inhabitants of the Philippines, and they are pygmy people, the tallest man being seldom above 4 feet 10 inches. They are a curious dark brown or black in color, have woolly hair, and can use their toes almost as well as their fingers. What does that imply? When people can use the toes as well as their fingers? The animal-like, yeah. But I think they're 4 times more adept at clutching things than we are. And these people are probably the lowest type of human beings known and have been described as, quote, not far above the anthropoid apes. Okay. I didn't know if he examined whether he had a tail or not. And then the taga Paulo, the same thing. He says that having a height greater and physique finer than most of the tribes of the island, little or nothing is known about them. And this one is my favorite because I come from the north and I see the Kalinga people all the time. In fact, one summer, I had a haircut the same as his, the guy's. Except that in this photograph, I keep wondering, I keep saying, Kalinga men don't wear their hair long. They cut it like a half coconut, which is what I did to the chagrin of my parents when I was 16 years old. And and then, of course, the women did not wear that skirt. They almost always had a shorter skirt with a different print. I don't know where he got this print. And then women in Kalinga don't wear this. This is called alampay. It's basically from the central area of the Philippines where there are Christianized people, but the indigenous peoples in Kalinga don't wear that. So I was telling myself, maybe I have my history wrong. Maybe Worcester was right. This is how they look like. And we will go to that much, much later. These are the things that he talks about when he talks about the pictures. He says that the images are peculiar. They have head access. We will see some of the pictures later. Women are referred to as girls, wild. And he has this thing about clothes. He likes to point out that they are half naked or scantily dressed, as opposed to being civilized and having something to wear to cover themselves. He also has a thing about color. In the 1900s, maybe, if you look at photographs, people in the West dressed in somber colors. And he looks at them and says, why are they wearing, well, not really, but he says, look at them. They're wearing gay colors. They're wearing orange. They're wearing, aquamarine blue. They're wearing turquoise. Of course, he didn't say those words because maybe he didn't have a glossary of color terms. He refers to their clothes as costumes. And there are pictures where he emphasizes that the people have stabbing knives or clothes that can only be worn by a man killer. Okay, what does that mean? Clothes that can only be worn by a man killer. And I told myself, oh, maybe he killed the man. So what's wrong with that? If he killed the man because the man was part of an army that was attacking them, and he killed that man or many men because of self-defense for his tribe, why shouldn't he be given a cloth that is only worn by wives of man-killers in the same way that we give medals or honors to other war heroes? But he doesn't explain. He simply says, This is a person, a wife who is wearing something that only a man-killer can wear. He has a thing about long hair, implying that having long hair is uncivilized. And of course, that was, later on in the 60s, the long hair comes back. Cheap European fan, curious bead pendant. It's an adornment, but to him, it's curious. Strictly forest dwellers, small tribe. He refers to a man as always partially clothed, or he distills rum from sugarcane. And then one of the things that he says, we will go back to this picture later, is that, I'm going ahead of myself. Anyway, let's stop here for a while. I will read some more of the captions. He says that this particular tribe likes to ambush is the preferred mode of combat of this particular tribe, never in the open, and they use poisoned arrows. Okay. So he doesn't explain that during that time, when the revolution was happening internally and with the Americans, they were using guns. So if I were a tribe and I use arrows, will I not ambush you because that's the best strategy to kill the enemy? But without that explanation, you just think that people are treacherous. Okay. Curious dark hair. What is the meaning of curious dark hair? These people are probably the lowest type of human beings I know. Or in this case, peacock of the Philippines. They revel in the brightest of colors. Note the small waist of the man. So when he talks about men, he likes to feminize them. He says, oh, look, he said they have long hair. In fact, they love long hair so much that they wear wigs sometimes. And then he says that their waists are small. And because they feminize the men, then what he actually means is that they're probably useless or weaklings, or, because he is selling the idea that America can claim these people very, very easily, that they can be easily subjugated. Okay? This is a particularly telling photograph because he says, here is a fine example of the kind of educational work that is being done in the Philippines. When the boys shown in this picture came to school, not one of them knew a note of music. Now this band can play any variety of music, from ragtime to light opera. Which is basically not true, because the Spaniards came and they introduced European opera to the Filipinos. They knew how to play these instruments, as in fact in the 1900s there were lots of Filipino composers who were composing Western music. That's number one. And number two, even if they didn't learn Western music, they had music of their own, the indigenous music where they used indigenous musical instruments. They had a culture all their own. Okay? I also would like to raise the issue of authenticity. This is supposed to be a Tingyan man. In the first picture, he says that they're almost always half naked, which is true. But look, he's wearing a Western-style shirt. So, and then of course he says that he wears a curious hat, and this is a raincoat made from palm. But the Tingyan people, they don't have that hat. That hat again is a Tagalog hat. So later I will tell you why he is doing this. This is another picture. Some of his pictures have backgrounds, but as he went on collecting pictures, he sort of like eliminated the background, and then you will only see them separated from their nature, from their organic location. There. And usually they have this scowl as if they were being forced to sit still for the picture. This one is a Lubwagan Igorot woman. Again, I say, is she Lubwagan? Because it's the same, but now it's a Tingyan girl. Basically the same ornamentation, the same kind, and it's a Tingyan girl. So sometimes he seems to not know what he is talking about, or maybe he is misleading the viewer into thinking that this is what he saw and this is what he knew. My favorite picture, of course, is a Tingyan girl in mourning. I'm not quite sure if this is true. I saw the original. It was sold in an antique shop for millions of pesos, and a friend of a friend of a friend of mine has one of the postcards, and it's beautiful. But look at it. It seems like it's photoshopped in a way, and there are golden halos around the areola and also on her shoulders and arms. And if you look at her arm, the one that crosses over her stomach, it's rather big for the whole proportion, right? So, well, he says that these are pictures of a Tingyan girl in mourning. But also from his point of view, he seems to be, how should I say it delicately, exoticizing to the point that it becomes a little bit uncomfortably sexual, but maybe it's just me. Okay, so these are other pictures that is presented in the magazine, an Ifuga warrior, a Bontoc Igorot woman, and a young Ata. He says of the second picture in the center, she is in working dress. This costume, suggestive of the style prevalent in the days of Eve, is commonly worn by Bontoc Igorot women during rainy weather or when working in the field. So just looking for logic, if it's raining, will I wear this? Or if I'm working, will I not wear something else other than being scantily dressed? And later on, it will be discovered by other researchers that sometimes, because Worcester wanted to have an effect in his photograph, would say, please take off your clothes. I want to take a picture of you with only leaves, with leaves on. Okay? One of the other things that we will notice is that when he represents warriors, he represents them singly, as if to say that, oh, they're nobody or they're nothing compared to the American army that we have. And then, of course, the implements that they have are always with a bow and arrow or a small scabbard, a short scabbard, and stuff like that. Thank you. So, same pictures, and also the Datu or the warriors that he depicts are old. No? They're not Mr. Universe. See. And they're always wearing colorful clothes, and as if he's saying, you know what, we can see them 10,000 miles away because this is their warrior garb, and then we can subdue them. And then, of course, he has a picture of an Igorot baseball game in progress. And he says, I have not previously mentioned what I believe to be a fact, that baseball is one of the really important things which the Bureau of Education has taught the boys. These games serve to bring the people together and result in endless good. So the implication is that the indigenous peoples of the Bontoc region don't have games to play, and that they're always ununified. Okay? This one is a picture of a Bagobo man and a woman, and he says in the caption that the Bagobo men are remarkable for their effeminate profile and are with difficulty distinguished from the women. So I kept looking at them, and I said, he couldn't distinguish the man from the woman. I could. Couldn't you?
Yes.
Yeah, but he said, well, yet again, he feminizes the men in order to push an agenda. And then, two manobos and a Bukidnon man, he wants to give us the impression that they've been given Western clothes and they are adapting to Western norms. So, and then finally, he has a series of photographs that are before and after, which is one of the formulas that have been adopted by colonialists in dealing with colonies. When they show you a picture of who we are before and what happens when they come into our lives. And this is his idea of what happens before or what happens after. The effect of little schooling. The picture to the left shows a typical Ilonggot girl as we found her. And the picture to the right shows an Ilonggot girl who has attended school for a time. So maybe the little girl also attended Zumba classes because her stomach has greatly been reduced. Okay. It turns out when they researched the archives of Dean Worcester that these two ladies are different. They're not the same person. And they also found out some other stuff, including this. This is a Bontoc Igorot on entering the military service, he says. And this is after a year's service, and this is after 2 years' service. So some of the researchers have written about this photograph from many viewpoints, one of which is the factual reality of this photograph. And these are the things that they found out. These two people are the same person. This person is not him. So what he did was he just juxtaposed another picture to present so that his narrative of a before and after would be complete. This picture was, as in fact, the researchers found out, this person is Don Francisco Munro. He is he's from Bontoc, but he has also gone to Spain, and he also went to America. As in fact, he spoke Spanish, and that he is referred to as Don Francisco Munro. And Don is an honorific term because he's probably somebody who is esteemed in his society. There's also a picture in the research that shows that he was wearing Western clothes when he visited Dean Worcester. And Dean Worcester said, "Take off your clothes, I want to take a picture of you." So there is one picture where he is here, and his clothes, which are Western clothes, are here. So you can see. And then for this particular picture, he just put up his hair, gave him whatever that is, a cap to wear. Oh, he was wearing the cap. Just put up his hair. He has the same mustache. And it's another indication that this person, even as he is a Bontoc, had adopted, previous to this picture, the mores of Western dress and style. Because the Bontocs don't grow mustache, but he did. And then finally they can't figure out who he is. But definitely, this person is not them. And finally, I think the coup de grace was that he dates, Worcester dates this picture as 1901. And he says that he took this picture in Bontoc, when in fact his diaries or his entries show that he didn't go to Bontoc until 1903. So there. Okay. Okay. I think that's my conclusion. So, okay, I'm going to the conclusion so we can have a conversation. Okay, so this is my conclusion. The truth in a photograph is seldom absolute nor ever complete. And deciphering the symbolic messages in a photograph gives us a better understanding of its meaning. About Worcester, this is my conclusion. Worcester trained as a zoologist but fashioned himself as an anthropologist. He took thousands of portraits and landscapes, and he presented the people as exotic specimens with quaint practices. And he also liked photographing some native women, exoticizing their appearance, and took photos of them with their blouses on and then without, in disregard of their usual practices. From my perspective, Worcester's photographs is a narrative that says the following things. These people, the non-Christianized inhabitants of the Philippines, are primitive, wild, dangerous, peculiar, with uncivilized practices, but there is hope. They can be rehabilitated through the good graces of the United States. They can be taught how to play baseball and Western musical instruments so that they will learn to play ragtime and light opera. In fact, they can be opted in the military force to suppress any nationalist revolt. They live in a place with a natural resource or natural resources that the United States can exploit. That is why he is always telling us that these people live in the mountains, there's lots of forests, there is no way in their places, and therefore the United States government should not grant them independence, but exploit them as a colony. Now, the persuasive power of Worcester's photographs comes from the fact that he was part of the colonialist machinery. He was, after all, the Secretary of the Interior. His photographs, both image and meaning, were accepted as true and shaped people's perception of the Philippines. And it did not only shape the perception of the legislators, it also shaped the perception of the American public. In the same way that when the Americans were losing the Vietnam War, the propaganda of the military just kept saying we were winning, and nobody could have cared less, except that people did. And finally, it did affect the Filipinos' way of looking at themselves, as in fact, I think the photographs tended to divide us into non-civilized people and civilized people. He manipulated the photographs, and there is evidence by later researchers that at the latter part of his work, he manipulated photographs so that he could push this agenda. And because of this, he became one of the most hated administrators in the Commonwealth. He was the object of an opinion page saying that he was a vampire, and for this, he filed a libel case against the editors and the newspaper. And I submit that looking at these pictures in the framework I presented teaches us that this should be a starting point for dialogue about the meaning of photographs, the interpretation of the past, and how to chart a more egalitarian future that guards against colonialist thought, the excessive exercise of political power, and the misrepresentation or erasure of cultural identity. Just a week ago, Martha sent me a link. The National Geographic issued an apology in their April issue about their editorial policy on indigenous peoples in general and how they were portrayed in the magazine. Did anyone read this? No. Anyway, what they said was they apologized because, number one, they always exoticized indigenous people, and that they underscored the difference as they are the other. The number two thing is that they said they apologized because virtually in every issue, there's a picture where the indigenous peoples are shown a Western gadget, and the faces of the indigenous peoples were in awe of these Western gadgets. And number three, they said, we apologize for the treatment of indigenous women because they were always portrayed as how do you call that? Their breasts being bare. And in National Geographic, there is no white woman who has been featured as or pictured as having her breasts bared. So I think I have one of the, going back to the original question in the talk, how much truth does a picture hold? For me, it's really, really very simple. A photograph holds as many truths as there are eyes who are able to see. Thank you very much. I will show you this one. Is a photograph that depicts Western gadget and the Ifugals. Very interesting, no? Any questions? Yes, Barry.
Nick, in National Geographic, what did they say? Were they as bad as he was in terms of the presentation, in terms of making the comparisons? I mean, it's true in terms generally on National Geographic.
Yes.
It commented, but I'm just curious, since they wrote in 1913 and he had an agenda in early 1900s.
Oh, but I cut them as I found them in the National Geographic. So these are the captions in the National Geographic. Mireille has a question.
My question is, I would like to know, what do you think, because now those pictures are very, how can I say, very true, very close to the reality. But nowadays, today with the Photoshop, most of the time, when you take a picture, it's possible to modify it.
Yes.
And it's not, the picture is not really close to the real physics. What do you think about that? Is it good or no?
Well, I think that this teaches us that when we look at social media, Facebook, Instagram, we are basically going back to this era where we really don't know the truth behind that picture. So in fact, when people say fake news is a contemporary thing or happening, I think not. I think people who have always had an agenda to push, always seem to want to manipulate reality in the way that will benefit them. So in a sense, that's what I'm trying to say, that if we understand that pictures can lie, even as physically it should not lie, it does because of that subjective aspect. You are receiving the message, and therefore you are being shaped by the image as well as you are shaping the image. In fact, John Berger says that we have to understand photographs as weapons that can be used against us and that we can use in return. Oh, Zach. Zach is a photographer. He knows this.
I just have a question. Thanks. I guess, yeah, as a photographer, it's something that you always sort of juggle with is what is objectivity, what is subjectivity. And for my opinion, I would say that objectivity is impossible, and that it's in acknowledging your subjectivity that you become more objective and truthful. I was struck when you were showing these. It reminds me of Edward Curtis. He did a series like a typology of indigenous populations within the U.S. I'm curious, the personal life of Dean.
Worcester.
Edward Curtis, his wife, because he was so involved in his work and doing his project, his wife left him. He died essentially alone with just his work. Do you know anything about the personal life of Dean?
Oh yes, Dean Worcester lived a king's life in the Philippines. He got involved with mining concessions, and he became very, very rich, so rich that he retired in the Philippines in the island of Cebu and died there. Prior to that, he went on a lecture series tour, including a lecture at Carnegie Hall, where he kept hammering the fact that the Philippines is not ready for independence. It is populated by uncivilized, primitive men, and he kept referring to these pictures as part of the evidence that he presented. And up to the point where he was invited to the Senate committee that drafted the Jones Law, which is the law that finally granted stepladder independence in the Philippines. Yes?
That kind of answers my second question, which is, I guess, what do you think the legacy is today of these pictures? What exists today as far as how people perceive things or how people perceive themselves because of this work?
Yes, that's a good question, because I was thinking, if these are archival pictures, people will look at them and they will look at them as is. I'm meaning to say that they will look at them like this and the caption without the understanding that the pictures and the captions form part of a context. Let me just tell you that I think that I look at photographs as being present, a particular snapshot, but it also has a past and it also has a future. And the future of these photographs for me is that I looked at Filipinos in the way that Dean Worcester looked at them before, meaning to say that, oh, he's from the mountain province. Maybe he's not as educated as I am, or he doesn't have the same technology. But now I know better that this was a message that was given to me and not individually arrived at. And therefore, I think the legacy of these pictures is that they are there. They're recorded. Some of these pictures have the part of the culture of these people, but not all of them are. And therefore, there's, I think, a need to be to discern, to have the gift of discernment and say, this is false, this is true, this might not be true. But if you tell me, if you ask me if I'm appreciative of Dean Worcester's pictures or his idea of taking the pictures, I might probably say no. I would not, well, yeah, sorry. Yes? Yes?
I have a question. I don't know if I just missed this part. So I noticed that he was just taking pictures of like the people from the mountains.
Yes.
Did he ever take pictures of the people from the city?
Yes, he did take pictures of the city, photographs, but it's problematic for him to present pictures of city people because they are in Western dress.
Yeah.
Yes, this is 1900. This was a time prior to this. We had scholars and revolutionaries who were poets who were well read in French democracy. And he curated his pictures so that he will only show the indigenous peoples. And he equated indigenous culture as being lower in hierarchy to a Western type of culture. Yeah, he has pictures of yung they wore barusay.
Just a follow-up. So the pictures that he took for the indigenous people, right? So he just wanted to show them, like the Americans, that this is how the situation is in the Philippines.
That's what he wanted us to believe.
Did he actually want to help them? Or like he wanted to modernize like these people?
Yes. He was saying that these practices are uncivilized or primitive, and with the help of America, they will now soon wear Western clothes.
So what happened? Like look
at this. This is so. It has a peace sign in it, or either a skull. So I don't know what print is that. It's so cool. Yes, you were saying.
Oh yeah, but then do you think they were successful in doing that?
Some of the tribes they've annihilated. That's why we have less.
Okay.
We have less indigenous peoples in the Philippines. And what he actually did was to divide the Filipino people and say those who are educated are much better off than those who are not. And later on, those who were educated sort of like were very conscious of their not so educated cousins. When they came to America, they would not say that they were Filipinos, or if they were Filipinos, there's a running joke. I don't know if people still remember. I remember it. Yeah. I'm supposed to go to America, and somebody will say, I understand that Filipinos live on trees. And the reason why they still say that joke is because of the prehensile feet picture. One of them, I mean, at least to my mind, I mean, if we have been portrayed as having prehensile feet, then we'll most probably live on trees. And I would supposed to say, yes, we live on trees. And then the other guy would say, oh, you must be very strong because you can go up and down the tree every day. And then I say, no, actually, I'm very weak. I use an elevator to go up and down. So that's the end of the joke. And just to complete the prehensile feet, it might be true that people have prehensile feet. In fact, study shows that 8% of the whole population have prehensile feet. Prehensile feet is when your feet have the dexterity of hands. So you can actually hold a spoon and a fork or drink Pepsi using your feet. But you know, that's an evolutionary condition, meaning to say, if you use your feet to climb up mountains and trees, of course you will develop prehensile feet. It doesn't mean that you're less than the one who doesn't have prehensile feet.
Questions, thoughts, comments?
Yes.
Looking at the pictures, I see them more as drawings than actual photographs. Not this one, but for example, the feet of this person, or the details in the, or look at the faces.
Yeah.
It's not. It doesn't seem as accurate as you were saying before. That a picture is a picture of the reality.
Yeah.
Is that because of the color, or where does that come from?
Very good question. That comes from the pictures being part of the capitalist commodity system. Meaning to say that they were meant to be postcards. In contemporary parlance, they were meant to have many likes. They are Instagram worthy. They have to stand out. They were meant to be postcards to be sold to Middle America in the 1900s, so that if you were in a bookstore maybe or a grocery store and you looked at them and you know, this is a white person or a white person in the South, seeing these images, they would buy them and say, oh, look at them, they're so quaint. Maybe one day we will visit them and take pictures and have, you know, stuff with them and bring back a bag or two.
These photographs were taken as black and white and they have been colored later.
Yes, they've been colorized, especially this one. She doesn't even look Tingian to me. Okay. Yes. This is the prehensile, I think. This one. Any other question? Yes.
I wanted to ask, maybe it's a simple question. I'm very curious because I read some stories about the anthropologists that, for example, in middle of 20th century, I just googled it because I forget.
Yes.
Margaret Mead and Derek Freeman. Margaret Mead, she went to Samoa. It's some of the
Samoa.
Samoa.
Yes.
And she, you know that story.
Yes.
And afterward, Derek Freeman, 40 years later, he went to the same place and he said that no, actually, there was not everything was the real like she described. And it seems I wanted to ask first how he communicated with local people. Maybe it's very simple because I don't have much information about your country.
Yes.
About that. So that's why I want to ask: how did he communicate with the people? And did ever anyone went to the same place and talked to people? Just not to check. I didn't know how to say it in English to say the
verify. Yes.
Verify
Yes. Very good.
All these pictures,
Yes.
all
Yes.
these stories are real.
Yes. 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 I have the answer. Thank God I have the answer to this question. Number one, yes, the stage of anthropology at this time was very, very early. Of course, we know Franz Boas and Malinowski, and later on, yes, that one. And they usually get interpreters, but in this particular case, the Bontoc people, they spoke Spanish. Some of them are, but when the Americans came and the American nuns came, they also were taught, and even up to now, their command of the English language is quite is up to par with the American grammar system. Also, the next one is, did anyone double check him? Yes, by the name of James Blount, who was his arch enemy. So James Blount, if you Google him, always talked about Worcester as a bad anthropologist because he manipulated stuff and did not do much of a scientific way of capturing his subjects. And your last question was about?
It was the same.
Oh yes, they used interpreters. Well, I have another point. In terms of the capitalist mode of production, this is where we see that whoever holds the machine holds the story. And when he is holding that story and focusing it on you, he becomes the voyeur because he doesn't want to be seen. I mean, it would have been a two-way conversation if he gave a camera to them and said, take a picture of me. But he doesn't do that. What he says is that, I am in power, I will take your picture, take off your clothes, put on your clothes, sit down this way, look this way, I will separate you from your environment and put a white cloth behind you so that you are just like a specimen, a butterfly, or maybe, an insect.
He's actually a zoologist.
Yes, because he is a zoologist. Yes. Yes, Nora.
Those are the methods. People in power decided that they can get away with all that. Do you think that anything has changed apart from the instruments, the subtleties? What do you think the situation is now?
I think what you're asking is, what is the best defense against all of these? I am saying that in some way, every news, whether it is fake or real news, has a reality embedded in it. And therefore, I think there's more reason for people to become more cognizant of who you are and what is the agenda of the person you are reading. How should I say it? I've taken that to heart, not only in terms of looking at pictures, but also in school when your teacher tells you something and I say, where is she coming from? Why is she telling me these? Or I'm reading a textbook and it says like this, and I say, no, from my reality, this isn't true. But why is it true in his or her reality? And I try to figure out, because at the end of the day, there's so many truths out there that you cannot accommodate them for one particular picture. But what is real is your reality of the truth. So if you say, I am like this, my loyalties are for this, and this is the way I look at things, then you can debate with another person who thinks of the same way in a different manner.
All right, I think that's an excellent place to leave it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.